Right.
It's always been, I don't know, it's 2 hours, I always know it's 2 hours from home, you know.
There we go.
It's good for your first stop.
But then you could just
Stretch your legs. And
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
if you didn't fill up the tank here.
And they have the big roofs.
That Perkins was my first job.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I waitressed there for a summer and then have not been a server since, and I tipped really well.
Yeah.
Because I know. Yeah, who hasn't?
That's kind of how I figure out the,
Okay, now we see what that means. Oh, no, there it goes.
Perfect. Apologize, we're just getting our stuff set up here, but I think we are ready to go if everybody else is. So you have a fair amount of material. Rather than handing stuff out parcel by parcel, I just threw it out all for you because I got here with enough to just spread it all out. But a few kind of our agenda before us and the things to talk about. Of course, go around and do our introductions as we always do. But then wanted to just spend a quick time on kind of a goal update and where we're at with goals across the entire Focus River Falls process. Then chat on land use. We've been working on that future land use plan. We want to chat through what that's starting to shape up and look like for you as well. And then, so we'll spend most of our time chatting through that process. And then we do have some fun element priorities and policy kind of topic areas that we want to share with you where we've been thinking across all of the plan elements other than land use and making sure that we're headed in the right direction, that we're not missing some topical areas that you're hearing are important, or, you know, thinking back to engagement that we may have missed. And then just wrapping up with next steps here as well. So, we will start with our introductions, and you guys should all have a plan element written on top of your agenda. Hopefully I passed those out accordingly. But we want to know, based on the plan element that you have on your agenda, what's one action that should be focused on for future implementation. So we're moving into the phase of starting to think about what those implementation actions are. So what's a, implementation, what's something in this, area of housing or recreation that you have identified, some action that you'd like to see the city take over the next 20 years. And maybe I'll go in reverse order to give. Amy and Emily have already been thinking in this space, so we'll let Chris have a little bit more time.
yes, so my element is transportation, and my implementation action would be sidewalk infill.
Yes.
Mine's utilities and community facilities. Well, I think we're already kind of doing this right now, but we're reevaluating our sewer service area. So as we're doing our future land use planning, thinking about where we can serve easily with utilities, where there might be some challenges with that, so that, we just have that good information in terms of when we might need to make improvements to the wastewater treatment facility. So what threshold of growth or development, or a new industrial business that comes in has a particular volume of use, and making sure that we're on track with that.
Hi everyone, my name is Massey. I'm the Management Analyst Fellow here with the city. And thank you for letting me join your meeting tonight. I appreciate it. Mine is housing, and I'm brand new to River Falls, about 2 months, so I'm learning to play catch up on all the things, but I think it's important to have an array, kind of a diversity of the housing options that are available. And I see some of that in the responses that you all have gotten up to this point.
My name is Patricia LaRue. I also have housing, but I attended those focus groups that we had, and one was on housing. And something I was totally unaware of, this has to do with the people without homes, is they can wait years for something 8. Some kind of a voucher, Section 8. They get this voucher and they're so excited because they've waited years for it. And then our landlords won't accept it. So they're still in the same boat. So something I don't know that we can do this, but some sort of incentive to our landlords to have them allow these people who've been accepted as Section 8 recipients, that they can in fact rent a house in River Falls and not be turned away.
Lisa Moody, and I also have transportation to piggyback on yours, to get the I don't want to say bike paths, but just the path work from one end out to the north end of town to connect your Sterling ponds, that they can get to downtown easily, safely. I have friends that bike ride every morning, and they normally do the university sidewalks and things because there's really no place comfortable. So I would work on that so that people can bike to and from work and wherever.
I'm Diane O'Dean. I think it's intergovernment cooperation. And one thing I would like to see happen is the city council currently meets every year with the school board. I would like to see us meet with the county supervisors that represent River Falls. We've got several on St. Croix. We've got like 3 or 4, including my husband, on Pierce. And I just think we could, if we invited them and maybe the chairs of the county boards, just for like a meet and greet, I think we could build some relationships where we could maybe coordinate some stuff.
Dan Tolan. I have utilities and community facilities. I kind of what Emily was saying about, we do it now, obviously, but looking to the future, okay, we think like what we're going to do here, the comprehensive plan, okay, if we're going to be building out this way, what do we need to do with our utilities to make sure they're going to be able to get there easy, as cheap as possible and all that, and keeping them updated as we go. Same with, the facilities, are we, whether it's another fire hall somewhere, or whether we're in the process of putting a water tower up. I know it really is it's kind of, would that be considered a facility? There, see, look at that. We're on top of it, we're doing everything. We're great. You guys are great. So.
Mike Woolsey. I think my priority was similar to Lisa's as far as the connectivity for bicycle paths and pedestrian paths. Something else that's kind of related to that in the transportation part is, and it's a little bit of my own ignorance and I should find out more, but I feel like we're lacking in the kind of transportation for people when it comes to taxi and public transportation. I think I'd like to see more of that. And just a little anecdote, I talked to, there was a person outside of Family Fresh who put his groceries on a trike with a really fat tire, and I'm into fat tire bikes, and I was asking him how he likes his bike. And I asked him, do you ride it in the winter? He said, well, sometimes I will. And he said, I have to have a trike. And he indicated that just with some mobility issues, physical, he needed that. And I started thinking, for a person like that, what are the options when you don't have the weather, you don't have the clearance of the streets? I didn't ask him, but there's folks in this community that seasonally they're doing certain things. And he had 2 full bags of groceries and he was pedaling away, but what does he do in the winter? So it's those kind of things that we probably have some questions and answers there.
So I'm Chris Holtkamp. I have natural and cultural resources, and I think I would support just seeing access to recreation space for all parts of town, whether that be actual parks in different neighborhoods or connecting the sidewalks and trails so people could get ride their bikes or walk to different recreation destinations. And I will say, as far as bike trails go, I'm super lucky because they actually sweep the bike path from my house that I ride to campus every day, because I'm on it every day, rain, snow, sleet, shine, I'm riding to campus, so I'm not getting those losers $400 for a parking permit. But
I have it for 15 years.
yeah, so I appreciate the bike path sweeping that they do, so that's a nice thing where it is, where there are trails that they can actually do that for it. So,
And the nice thing about saving $400 a year is after a couple of years, you can justify it to your spouse, I need a new bike.
or the electric bike is what I really like, I mean, it's all of a mile from my house to work, so I don't need any bike for that short of a distance, but you know, part of me's like, you know.
Excellent. Some really great ideas, and it's kind of keep that brain going as we move through the conversation here and get to the later part of the agenda. But wanted to just jump in with kind of an update on where we're at with the goal. We've talked a lot about the comprehensive plan goals for the process. Those of you on council, we had our workshop and spent some time. And I think, you know, just as a reminder and place setting that we still consider these goals to be in draft until we're talking implementation at the end. And we're looking at the actions that we're setting forth to make sure that we've set ourselves up with achievable goals. So we want to make sure that it makes sense when we're laying out the action. So, you know, generally we're not going to see many changes, but if we need to, we can make some tweaks throughout there as well. And so you have two documents in front of you, and I'm not going to go into them into deep detail, but maybe you had the opportunity to take a look at them as well. And I'm going to pull them up on screen here just as well, so we have them in the on the recording as well. But the first that we'll talk about is the goals technical memorandum, and this is specific to the comprehensive plan goals. And really what we were trying to do here was lay out the draft goals that we have right now. You may remember that we were at a magic number of 12 and 13 for a while. And, you know, through some additional review, council discussion, we are down to 9 goals. We did some combining of some things where it made sense. So just made that number feel a little bit more manageable for us. And we also went through and we intended that these are goals that are applied to the entirety of the comprehensive plan, but you can definitely, if you're reading through, see the theme or the plan element that they connect most with. So there is, you know, there is a goal, for example, I think it's goal 3, that really connects to transportation, for example. I think the next one connects to our natural, you know, agricultural, natural and cultural resources, things like that. But they're meant to be those overarching statements as well. But this document is really meant to highlight what that goal statement is, as we've been talking as well. I should show it on here. Our plan elements that go across, we don't, you know, as we talked about, we have issues and opportunities in implementation. We're not connecting the goals to those because these are goals because of what our issues and opportunities are, and our implementation actions will be the actions to respond. So of course they align with each of these, but have gone through, and any of them that are in color as we go through each goal are ones where the goal connects to that plan element. So we did a good job throughout where there's a lot of color throughout. So that's great because this is a connected system. Everything is tied together. And then we've identified some of the key themes that came out of engagement or the data collection process that really helped us inform the goal statement that was created. So this document is just helpful to provide a little bit of background and support into the goal statements that we have solidified. So Amy, am I missing anything in kind of how we've been working and finalizing these, or? Okay. So again, I won't go through, you know, everything here in full detail, but if you did have an opportunity to take a look, you know, let me know. But I'll maybe just keep it high level and kind of read through the goals as they've been refined, and can chat about some changes that were made throughout as well. But this is really an overarching goal, this first goal that kind of talks to all of our plan elements, in some ways almost a vision statement. There was a little work that was done with this one. This was a very kind of blanket statement in the last round that was presented with council, that we are, I think it was thriving community or something pretty broad to that. So we took a little work here to make sure that we were really responding to that welcoming nature, and that there are a lot of opportunities in the community, that there is a sense that from community members that we are a welcoming community. There's lots of opportunities for me to be who I want to be. And so that's really this goal that we were trying to solidify there. And I'm just going to keep moving through these, so stop me if you want to chat through anything. Our second goal here really combines housing and economic development together. So this is our one where we've got two plan elements that really come together here, but the overall message here is, and those two are very connected components as well, but we heard throughout that the diversity of housing options, but also the diversity of that we want diverse housing options. We want access to different housing options, but we also want access to jobs that pay a living wage, and we want access to those retail or entertainment opportunities. So it's a little bit about diversity in access, but also maintaining, that livability within the community. So really combine those goals, or those two themes together there as well. The next is our focus on transportation. And so, really here, it's just a high level, trying to think about that connected system that's thinking about all modes of transportation. That when we think transportation, we are not just focused on vehicular movement, we're thinking about whatever mode it is, and doing that in a safe, so people can be safe, they can move efficiently, but we're also doing that in a sustainable manner as well. The next one, we grouped together we had separate goals for natural resources and cultural resources in a previous iteration. We've grouped them together here. They're in one plan element, but really thinking about how we prioritize those existing natural resources. That was a huge message we heard throughout engagement, is that desire to be connected to the resources that we have available, and that we prioritize investments in them, and that we also celebrate the rich history. It was really cool to see the pop-up museum down here. In high school, the tests, you take the what career fits you test. My answers were archaeologist or architect. So, maybe I should have been an archaeologist, but anyway, just celebrating that range and history of resources that we have in the community as well. Our intergovernmental goal here, creating that mutually beneficial relationship with a broad sector there. So not tailoring that to just our, the towns and the county, but the school districts, both, at the local level and at the university level, and all of our other state and regional agencies and things of that nature. This is one that doesn't necessarily connect specifically to a plan element, but is a little bit broad in terms of that being equitable and inclusive as we are making decisions. And so this is one where we're being a little bit more direct on kind of that welcoming aspect, but we did, have heard throughout, we had a stakeholder group specific on, I think a sense of place and inclusion. And so just being very thoughtful about how we are making decisions, that everybody is involved in that process to the extent that we can. Here we are thinking about our infrastructure and community facilities along with that resilience component. So thinking very thoughtfully about what infrastructure we're putting into place, and that we're doing so in a manner that's going to help us be a resilient community moving forward. That's thoughtful of the investments that we are putting into place and maintaining that quality of life moving forward. Here we get to our land use goal and trying to be very deliberate and intentional with growth management. We want to make sure that we have flexible policies that, you know, open the door for us to have those conversations for how growth can occur, but that we are thoughtful in how that growth is occurring, and that we have a connected system of development and redevelopment. So thinking that's, you know, trying to allude to, you know, yes, it may show that we have X color on the land use map, and that means we can put X and Y here, but we also want to be thinking about what that means for our transportation network and our utilities, and making sure that we are building in a connected network. And that we also support a strong connection to place. There's a lot of discussion with the council about the kind of coming back to our core and our Main Street core and that core of community. So wanting to, and also from the public about not losing our identity. That I think a lot of what we heard, when we hear that no growth comment, it's more that we don't want to lose the identity as we grow. And so making sure that we're thoughtful through the development process, that, you know, we're not becoming Hudson as we move through things with staying River Falls. And then finally, our outdoor recreation goal, and this is meant to be a little higher level, of course, as it connects to the goal statements within the outdoor recreation plan, but just making sure that we are thinking about accessibility to everyone from a recreational standpoint, that we connect to those natural resources. We heard that very loudly. And then there was a lot of discussion on kind of that healthy lifestyle, or access to a healthy lifestyle, whether that's physical, social, mental health, making sure that that has space here as well. So Emily or Amy, did I miss anything in the updates? Probably went into too much detail, so stop me if I go too far. Any thoughts or questions on the update of where we're at with our goal statements?
When I read through these, I kind of expected Tinkerbell and Mickey Mouse meeting people at the front, because this is the happiest place on earth, you know? If we're, you know, if we achieve these goals, that, and obviously we're not gonna be like that, but it did sound like we kind of touched everything, and we are gonna be the happiest place on earth.
Well, where would we, maybe I missed it, was it 7? Where's the economic development part of it?
Goal 2.
Would be 2. One of the things I look at with this is, you know, this is a framework for how we make decision making. It's, and I'm just wondering the context, you know, what I like about what we've been doing in recent years is that the staff, when they come together with a plan, a developer comes in, for example, staff will cite certain documentation and say, we believe this meets this particular, the Kinney Corridor plan, for example, and they'll cite that. I look at this as, it'd be nice for future decision makers to say, this meets goal 9 and 7, and or the public can say, I don't agree with this plan. It doesn't align with what I believe is goal. You decided in 2022 that this was the goal, and I'm seeing that maybe this particular proposal is not aligning with number 2 or number 4 or whatever. And so that's kind of the way I look at what we're doing here. I'm just concerned about, sometimes we go through these processes and then we get it completed, and then we forget that the document has these points. And I would like to see in the future that if this is it, if this is the framework for how we make decisions, and we can refer back to verifying that, yes, it meets the goal.
Yes.
You know, on that, so like the comp plan we did in 2007, 6, 8, whatever it was, we refer to that quite a bit.
Yep.
I mean, we go back to that quite a bit, so
Yeah.
hopefully this will be the same, like you said.
Another tool.
Yeah, going forward. And I know we use a lot of different studies we've done, and that, especially with developers, you know, like, hey, this will fit, you know, we did this study, or we have this need, or whatever. So hopefully, I agree with you. Hopefully, as we move forward, councils and staff will be able to come back and look at whether it's this or any other documents we create. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Well, I think that's our responsibility as planning commission too, right? Like,
Yeah.
we should be
planning
referring
commission.
to it when we get a proposal, like, we shouldn't just rely on staff to look at the comp plan. We should also be like,
Yeah.
I mean, not to tell what's here is wrong, but, you know, we do have an obligation as in our position to do that as well. Yeah.
And that's why I kind of mentioned the
Yeah.
public could even do that.
For sure, for
And
sure.
say, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't.
But we have,
And that's what
we have to remember to be, we're flexible too. We
Right.
can't just say, well, no, it doesn't meet that goal, so we're not, you know what I mean?
Well, and I think the goals are,
Because that's how some people take it literally.
yeah, right, that's true, that's true.
But, you know, we're pretty, what's the word I want to say? We're pretty
Pragmatic.
pragmatic. We go out of our way to make
The city's very plan driven.
very plan driven.
Yes.
We don't have it's not a laser focus like this, it's much wider.
And I don't think you can be laser
No,
focused
no.
because of the market, the way people,
Yeah.
what people bring into the
Yeah.
proposal, that's where that's the
Yeah.
margin that you're always kind of, it's where you gotta be flexible.
I think the goals as presented are broad enough to where,
Yeah.
you know, it's not saying we will create, 50 new townhomes or
Right.
whatever. Like,
Right.
we're gonna create a diversity of housing, so we can look at a proposal and be like, okay, that's gonna add to the diversity of housing, so
Right.
it, goes with goal 2 or whatever.
And there will obviously be more content when we get into, and that's why, part of why we want to have the last agenda item here is to make sure that we have the additional, like, there will be more context and supporting documentation within each chapter to be able to connect to those components as well. But it's also the reason why we kept these broader rather than saying that this was the housing goal.
Right.
Because if you are reviewing, let's say Sterling Ponds was coming before us after this comp plan was done, that there are multiple goals that you would be looking at in here, not just, housing and land use. We'd be looking at that, transportation from a connectivity perspective. And okay, let's really make us think about how are we connected from a mobility system. This makes, yes, it meets our comp plan from a land use perspective and we can provide utilities in that area, but what more do we need to do to make sure that it's connected back to the core of the community, right? So that we were intentional about how we set up that framework. So we're thinking more broadly rather than just element by element as well.
Right.
Excellent. Okay. Well, the next one that I will just call your attention to is the Focus River Falls Goals document. So this does have, of course, the comprehensive plan goals identified as well. And I won't go through them in detail here so we can get to the other pieces, but wanted you just to have access to the goals and objectives out of the bike and pedestrian plan, and then the goals for the outdoor recreation plan as well, and those key themes. Those of you, the bike and pedestrian goals has been in this framework for quite some time, but have gone through iterations of review with that steering committee as well. So we're looking at, topics of, and these are great because they align with the goals of the comprehensive plan as well, when we're thinking about topics of accessibility, thinking about access for everyone, connectivity, that we're having a connected system, getting to Lisa's point, thinking about health and safety, that safety of our modal opportunities, but also the health of our community that comes into play, sustainability, a common thread, and then economic vitality. So even bringing in that economic development component into the considerations of the bike and pedestrian plan. This, the objectives here do provide another level of detail, obviously, than what we have laid out so far in the comp plan. And then we have our outdoor recreation plan and key themes and goals as well. So here from the key themes, again, we were just thinking about, preserving our existing facilities, that we have partnerships in place to support, maintaining our existing facilities and planning for new. We'll talk about some green corridors here in this concept of what are our existing resources, and rather than thinking about them as individual spaces, what is the network that they create, and what does that mean for recreation, but also we'll talk about from a development standpoint and preservation as well. that we are allowing for, new spaces that allow people to connect. I think it's been a big conversation. Not only do we want places to get out and be active, but that social connection component that recreation provides as well was a really big factor that we've been talking about. We've got a goal here on resources to make sure we're connecting to those cultural and natural resource components as well through our recreation system. And then a couple that just focus on our overall system and providing access and safe and equitable access to our recreation system as well. So more to come with how these are forming in those goals, or in each individual plan, but it is great to see that the connectedness between the key themes across the 3 plans, which is the whole benefit of doing this focus driven follow process in whole. So, anything from you two I missed on goals? Okay. Perfect. So then we get to move into the conversation on land use. So a couple things out in front of you, and we'll get to the good part here. I'll try to get through some of the just logistic components first. But you do have a 2-pager here that outlines our the land use categories that have been developed. We talked about these at our July meeting, so I'm not going to go through and describe them in great detail again, but just at a high level, we're working with 3 core residential categories that are really based on the difference with what makes them individual is the density that's allotted. There's, thank you, Emily. Is the density that separates them, and then the different actual products that would then fit within those densities. Obviously, in a lower density category at 6 units or less per acre, you're not going to see an apartment come in at 6, at that low of a density. You're going to see your single family homes, maybe some duplexes or things like that. Your medium density is at 6 to 12 units per acre, and then high density at 12 units per acre or greater. There, of course, will have to be. Dan, did I not get?
It's probably here somewhere.
Okay, I apologize.
I bring too much junk.
I don't think he's got.
No, I knew it.
Okay. Right
There you go. Perfect. Not bad.
Yeah, so there's those, it's just the high level, and then the next page gets into kind of our non-residential categories, our commercial, industrial. And here, I think the difference, and we talked about this at our last meeting, is we're more general than we are in our current comprehensive plan. And that's intentional, to let the comprehensive plan be more of a guiding document, and then allow you to have a little bit more flexibility when it comes to administration and decision-making on where those different land use or zoning districts make sense and things like that. So we have our overarching commercial category and industrial category as their base. We do have a specific corporate park land use designation in here as well. And then one of the big changes would be that mixed use category as well. There was, I think we talked about this at the last meeting as well, a lot of discussion about how we wanted to integrate mixed use as a land use decision. And what we came down with is that we're going to go with one mixed use category rather than having a downtown and a neighborhood and a university, that we have one core set of standards with some flexibility that then comes in and applies. But the one intent or one component of this would be that the blocks along Main Street would be part of a specific kind of sub area or overlay, where we're really only looking at vertical mixed use to really maintain that core of Main Street that we have, but that the other areas where this mixed use is in play would allow us to have a combination of both vertical and horizontal mixed use. So you're seeing a little bit more flexibility in there as well. And of course, we have a public and institutional category, and a, so that includes all of our schools and government and churches, those types of uses. And then our park and our open space, and that open space is really our kind of our conservancy equivalent from that standpoint. So when we're talking park, we're, our active dedicated park space versus our open space of conservancy. The one thing I will note here as well, when we get to looking at the draft land use map, is we've taken these core categories and then also applied them outside of city limits, but are showing them a little bit differently just at this point. But the intent is that it's the same guidance that would come into play in those areas outside. So anything from an overview I'm missing there?
So I think this may be too detailed for this, but I'm thinking like accessory dwelling units, is that incorporated into like single family, just the low density, or is it, I know it's probably gonna get into the next step of like how you change the zoning regs, but I just.
Yes, so that was, I think that was something that we had included in the description and then removed just from where we're at in the process piece and coming in. But I think, overall intent is that, depending on from a policy and regulatory standpoint of how we want to manage those, they would then figure out how they fit within the categories here. Rather than having the land use categories dictate how you want to do things too. And then there will be more that will come out of that housing chapter that will help inform that, but, and I don't know, Emily, did I do an okay job covering that, or?
Yes,
Okay.
I think these categories are again meant to be that
Yeah.
higher level, and so talking about residential, it's more some type and density. But then once we get into the zoning, that's where we'll decide where those things go, or performance standards associated with if you want to do this use. Maybe it's allowed use in several different zoning districts with performance standards.
I guess I'm trying to square this with the public part. It seems like the public entity becomes what it is, and then it becomes zoned that. So when I look at a school, I look at that's in a residential zoning area. But then you build a school and then you slap the blue color on it, right? I mean, it's like, from a planning standpoint, how does that, I can see when you're looking at a gray for commercial, and you're kind of figuring, okay, this space would be for that. But I don't see beforehand where you say, well, this is blue.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to.
It's a very common question in this land use planning process, and the intent of why we categorize public and institutional different is the service that they provide to the community. So as we're looking at this from a 30,000 foot level, it's helpful to see the connectedness of schools where we have some of those services available. But it's very hard for us to plan where that next school, unless the school district has already purchased property.
Right.
That's the only time that we would identify a future public or institutional land use, or we knew that, the university was expanding and they, because we don't know exactly where that's going to happen. We might say, in conversations with school district, that they know that their next school is going to be, north of Sterling Ponds. Okay, we're still not going to go and pick out a 40-acre chunk to identify, because that would pigeonhole them to only that area when there's too many other factors. We might put a symbol up there that says somewhere in this area, the new school district, or the next elementary school is going to be.
And it's the same with parks too.
Exactly, and yep, so we don't, you'll see conservancy or open space shown outside of city limits, but we don't know, we don't want to pigeonhole again the city into having to, because of course, then we put his the next regional park at his house, and now it's gonna hold, the city ransom for, way more than the property may be worth, because he knows that that's, so there's a little bit of play that comes into that, that thought as well.
So in a way, there's the certain categories to me is that when you're at a strategic level, long-term planning is, you got your corporate and industrial and then the housing. But the others are kind of the park, institutional, those are delivered to you after those other entities or other.
From a growth
Right,
perspective.
right.
Yes, yeah, and that's part of the reason why, there is the university is a different animal, obviously, because they're handling development differently in terms of future land use categories, but it's having your schools and things be in residential zoning is a very standard practice, because it's just what makes sense.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
great questions. Okay. So then I wanted to, if there's no other questions on those categories, wanted to jump to the 11 by 17 that you have in front of you. That just talks about our planning boundaries here. And just setting the stage, oops, make sure I get this big enough so those watching. There's a few different things at play here. All of the names of which hopefully you're already aware of, but want to just talk about what we can affect change within the comprehensive, what gets changed with the comprehensive plan and what is, if changes are going to occur as an implementation action. And so there's a few different things shown on here. And I just wanted to put them in buckets. So from like a statutory perspective or what the city is given authority to have from a legal standpoint, what the state says, hey, so you can do effective growth management planning, you can establish these boundaries. But there is a strict process that has gone through with the city and the towns to establish those boundaries and exercise that authority. And so that really comes into play with our extraterritorial zoning boundary, which is the brown or maroon color. That's where we've exercised our ETZ zoning authority. We have our subdivision control boundary, which is the widest out boundary, or this, probably too many teal colors in here, but this teal color out here, that's the widest authority that we have currently exercised. And then as part of that becomes the urban reserve area that was just developed in a different way with Niconet Township. In terms of that agreed upon area, there is an agreement in place that that's the planning area that we're going to be looking at in kind of the same way that we're using the subdivision and ETZ boundaries.
And so that's an area where the town and the city have agreed, like that's where the city's gonna go.
Boundary agreement.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so that's that gray area.
And Amy just told me yesterday she's gonna start working on the other 3 townships.
Starting with Troy, right?
No, Troy, we're just gonna take what we want. Screw them.
So the context with that I just wanted to be clear about was that the comprehensive plan as an implementation action may say that the city should, should look into, conversations to extend that subdivision boundary to, the max extent of what we're allowed by state statute, or that we want to expand it in Troy Township, or whatever the case may be. But the comprehensive plan, when we adopt it, doesn't have the authority to change any of those boundaries that we just described. There's a separate process that has to be gone through. Very likely we'll have actions that say we should reevaluate, or we should evaluate those boundaries on a 2-year basis or whatever that might be. But that's where we can affect change there. The pieces, and of course city limits become are in that category as well. We're not that's the annexation process for those boundaries to change. What the comprehensive plan uses from a boundary perspective is our urban area boundary. And so this is where we should have used a different color, but kind of at least on this
I just
screen.
like your cartographer.
Teal light.
I'll tell Mitch.
I'll tell Mitch, there's more than teal in
Yes.
the color palette. I've seen GIS. I know there's lots of colors.
So we have the urban area that is currently within the current comprehensive plan is this lighter teal in here. We've gone through, so the exercise that we went through with you at the last meeting, conversations with council and staff, we went through and analyzed how do we want to change that urban area boundary in terms of really thinking at this is the area that we want to be more focused in on concentrating growth. Obviously, that doesn't mean that, just because this area up here is within our urban area, but that's, where we're going to focus first. We want to be thoughtful about, proper growth management and all of those things. But so you can see where we've, done some expansion to, and part of this was also looking at what our official map shows in terms of future transportation improvements, making sure we're thoughtful about where those improvements are being planned, and I'm thinking through things there as well. So generally, we're staying pretty close to that existing boundary, but bringing in, some new areas to just expand our focus area a little bit beyond there as well. The biggest growth areas are, here in Troy, with just some different opportunities, particularly, and we'll get into more of maybe why we've identified these areas too when we see the land uses. But, when we get Man Valley, where is that next growth occurring, and some of those things as well. So the other piece that we did make sure to do here is the current comprehensive plan urban area uses city limits. In Kinnickinnic Township, we've included that boundary agreement area as to establish the area in Kinnickinnic. So anything I'm missing from you two on areas we expanded or in detail? Okay. Any questions from the steering committee? Okay. So then I keep teasing the land use, but before we get to chatting through land use, I also wanted to take a space, and you don't have this in front of you because we plotted it nice and big. And I do have extra copies of it nice and big if you want to go home and redecorate your living room with River Falls caps.
Certainly use them in class.
Yeah, you can take them. But first, I had kind of alluded to this concept of green corridors as we were working through goals. And really, this was started as a process of looking at what our natural resources are that are things that can be either a benefit or a barrier to development in some ways. There are things that we want to preserve. There are, areas where there are other, regulatory requirements that need to be factored into development considerations. But it's really our opportunity to, again, think about those natural resources. A lot of these are components that make River Falls who it is, from just the land that we have. And so what we've done and identified here is gone through and thought about, okay, from those natural resources, what do we have in play to kind of look at what our connected network of, when we group all of these things together, what is that kind of network of green or natural spaces? So throughout, we have, from a river perspective, we were looking at more than just the actual river itself. What is that? The floodplain, the floodway. That is part of that. That's obviously very connected to what we're allowed to do from a development standpoint, but there's some, there's need to protect that area as well. So our blue hatching here is our 100-year floodplain throughout the community. We also have gone through and identified existing Conservancy zoning, both within and outside of city limits. So in our ETZ, these are areas that we've already made the decision through that rezoning process that we want to be thinking of. There's a specific reason why we're looking at conserving those areas. We also have our park and rec areas, so our park zoning within the community is also identified in our green colors here as well. And then all of our wetlands, and that's really just the wetland boundary itself, are identified in that lighter blue. And then we've also gone and looked at our steep slopes. And so this was an analysis that the city had already prepared, but anything that's a 12 to 20% slope is in orange, and then over 20% is in red. And these are just areas where, you know, the slope is, there's lots of things to consider. You probably can't build on that level of slope. It's going to create transportation or connectivity challenges, but it also helps us start to identify where some of our, you know, bluff tops are, that we also want to be thinking about that view shed development opportunities and those kinds of things. So a lot of different, you know, components that are coming into play here, but it's great to kind of see how all of where they all lay out and kind of create a connected system. And so the intent would be that we're thinking about these as establishing this green corridor as ways for us to think about how we want to, the policies or recommendations that would come into play and how we're maintaining, preserving, enhancing, considering development impacts with these areas as well. So the intent would be that we've shown them as different categories so you can understand all of the layers that we're building in here, but they become a single, here is you know, one green color that would, you know, go across. So you're just thinking about these not as the individual component that they are, but thinking about them as that connected network. So Amy, or Emily missing anything kind of background? And
I think it's really just focusing on the assets and amenities that we have in the city with these natural features. But also what's, you know, what she's also got on here is that urban area boundary we just talked about. And so if you looked at it without the topography and the water features, you might think that's a lot of land. But when you look at it with this layer on top of it, you start to see that, you know, the actual net developable area is not everything within that green boundary. So it's just another kind of, it's an important layer to recognize from a number of perspectives.
And there are a couple of ways, you know, when we get into the land use piece that we'll chat through as well about how these areas could be incorporated or influence what our future land uses look like outside of city limits as well. And we'll kind of chat through what our options there are when we get to that point. But any initial reactions? Are we missing, you know, an area? The one thing that we did do some looking at was also habitat areas. And there are lots of different agencies that do different habitat, you know, scoring and collecting. When we've started layering things together, obviously, there were a lot of similarities. We weren't really missing any areas there, and it's hard to, you know, you've got one organization that's looking at, you know, bird species. There's not a common methodology to say that we've equally looked at all species to be able to use that as its own data point. But generally, when we're overlaying these, you know, the floodplain is a primary area where you're seeing that sensitive habitat. So we're already covering those areas, you know, for the most part.
So do you have like the KRLT data, like their conservancy lands on here? Is it just the city, like where they have conservation easements and that sort of thing? Is that included in the green spaces on the map? Because they've got their own network of conserved land that may potentially be part of connections and networks.
It doesn't look to me like they're on there.
No, I think it's, well, so,
It may be, and I mean, I'm sure I can get the data for you if you know, if you can't find it, let me know, I can get it for you, but.
I think it's DNR only. DNR only.
This is what that,
I don't see the DNR only on here.
oh yeah, that's another one too. Cause that may fill in some gaps as well.
we can take a look at what that looks like too. 'Cause the one piece about the current areas that we've identified are under, the city's already made decisions in terms of that Conservancy zoning. From a policy standpoint, I think depending on, because you might say that like the UWRF farm, like, is that something that should, we're thinking more on a natural resource standpoint versus agriculture, there's some different things, but we want to be thoughtful about where the city has already made decisions. And so depending on what policy connections that these end up having. And so, but we can definitely look to get them in here and see how that works for us moving forward too. Okay, and again, I have lots of copies of this, so feel free to.
Can you send us a copy of this?
I did not, it's a
Oh,
big.
can you?
Oh, we can, yes, yeah,
That'd be great.
it's a big file, but
Might need to export the PDF as an image file.
yes, we'll figure out a different way to.
Is it that big? I
It's,
suppose it's big.
the slopes layer
Right on there,
is a big thing, but we're working on figuring out how to get it smaller for you. Mitch got it down to 12 megabytes, but that's still bigger than some emails will. So,
Okay, if you can't, don't worry about it.
No,
If you
we'll-
can,
we'll get it to you, yeah. Okay, perfect. So then.
And I assume the bike ped folks are probably actively using this in terms of their work.
Yes, yeah.
Cool.
I had a very good conversation with Maria earlier this week where we were trying to figure out some connections from the north and how we connect Sterling Ponds in that growth area to the north.
And that's where this is also really helpful to answer some of those questions, like why are we not growing here? Or why is growth in these areas? Well, a lot of it is due to the natural features.
I think I hung up on colors and things, but if the Man Valley farm from the university came into the city, what color would we apply to it? Is it blue or is it, would it be? It's because it's education, but it's not. There isn't an ag.
it'd be nice.
So it'd just be.
It'd be teal.
Yeah.
It'd be teal.
But it would be helpful to know that, okay, it's an agricultural institutional use. And so is there opportunity to enhance habitat or have other types of connectivity or, those kind of things?
Well, they do in the forest area up on top, like it's open to the public and they're actively, I think there's a subdivision kind of down the hill that they're actively, making connections to and creating public trails that people can walk through on the property.
Well, there's.
It's multiple times, so
What's that?
just because university now doesn't mean it's gonna stay university.
So now we can kind of transition into looking at that future land use plan. And I don't know, it probably we printed these nice and big to make them closer. So if you guys are comfortable, we can gather around the table here or whatever people would like to do too. If it's too many people in one, we've got other copies to do it. People would like to
Is this unsafe, right?
This is, yeah.
So what do you want us to look at? What do you
So,
want us to do?
yeah, so I figured we could kind of walk through things generally and talk at a high level about where we started to lay out some of the different land uses, where we're seeing some of those changes as well. One thing I will note that I forgot to call out on the boundary map, part of this process is also developing 3 small area plans where, from a land use side, we're saying at a high level, this is the general use that we'd like to see here to provide that guidance moving forward. The small area plans give a deeper level of consideration on more detail of what those different uses should be, what are some different the infrastructure components, more of a master planning exercise for those areas. And so they are identified with the red dashed line. And maybe Amy, you can help me in the reason why they were chose maybe at a higher level.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Okay, so on the west side, you've got the bus garage, you've got where Locust is coming through to Apollo, the Spring Pond area. We wanted to take a closer look at that, the compost is moving. Just the Spring Pond area from the corridor communication as well. And if the bus garage were to move in the future, that would potentially be a development area. On the far east side, we've kind of got the CDTC and multifamily area in there where we could potentially get different density, maybe different access through there in the future. Something that we could take a look at.
So the Moody's, that's, did the CDTC take that over?
CDTC's over here.
Right, did they take over the Moody's?
Yep.
So when that.
Oh, yeah, you got part of it, yeah.
Or
It should be. They're doing classes there.
this one,
Yeah.
the big red, the
It
big
is,
blue for me.
correct. Yes, should be good.
And is there
so-
still a plan on the table for the DNR, or not DNR, Department of Transportation for the, like, the wasn't this going to be redeveloped and redone for Cascade? And does that?
Yes.
Phase two,
Yeah,
but
that's what they're gonna be doing.
that's indefinitely planned, right?
Yes.
Future.
The engineers keep saying that roads in true good condition to
Okay.
do it right now, so it'll be down the road.
And is that
But
blue?
this one's in
Correct.
planning.
Yeah, Wassner's.
And is that where those apartments are going in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the lost.
Yes.
That stripy area? Okay. Or-
No,
No,
the little green piece
little
next
green
to
piece,
it.
yeah, right there.
Yes.
Right there.
Okay, so that's,
Yeah. Yes.
so that's, yeah, that's gonna be more.
The last small area plan is over along Cascade and down South Main to Park Street. Really just taking a look
Oh,
at
yeah.
that whole area. You know, we've had developers come through and property for sale there and have had proposals and neighborhood interest. We've got the campus corridor study, but not a real solid plan effort there. So we thought it might be good and pertinent to take a look at it.
We got the, what we call the plan.
South Main study.
South Main.
Yeah, the South Main corridor, that whole
Yeah,
study.
that's what
that
They
too.
included that as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just a little context there, as I forgot to mention those areas earlier, but you know, this is definitely still in draft form, obviously, so if there are things like we're already starting to call out that needs to be changed, please let us know. But really, I'll start with what's inside city limits, starting in kind of the same order from the land use perspective. That, you know, brightest yellow color is our low density residential. So you'll see a lot of that, but that's our 6 units per acre or less. If you were to look at the zoning map, that's really where we have our R1 zoning from that perspective. And really for the, you know, in a majority of spaces, if that's the use that's existing, it's going to maintain.
So with the, like the downtown, they're more dense than 6 per acre, aren't they?
I think we have to do a little more calc in there to just make sure it becomes a little bit of a gray area to just how you want to. It's a challenge when you have varying lot sizes, you know, and when we're thinking of how you're managing it, whether it's a net density perspective or a specific lot acreage perspective.
I would just be concerned that when we do get into zoning, that we don't zone it for 6
Right.
units per acre, then all of a sudden we're getting, you know, a million variance
Yeah.
requests because we can't build on a lot that's existing.
Right, yeah, for sure. And then, so yeah, it's a good transition into then the conversation on, of course, we have our, in the kind of peachy color is our medium density residential, and then our orange is our high density residential. So staying in that yellow and orange space for our residential. And then we get into in a lot of spaces, at least within city limits, a lot of what you're going to see is representative of existing for the most part. Except for in our area near downtown. So I'll jump right into mixed use. And again, so that's in our pink. And that's where you're gonna see some change. There are some of, especially along Main, there was a lot of mixed use identified through the Kinney Corridor Plan. So we did do an assessment there to make sure that we were aligning with the guidance of the Kinney Corridor Plan where it still made sense. So, there's a lot of some different uses. If we were, taking exactly what was there today, you'd see some different colors, throughout. But the intent here again is that the guidance is when that use, somebody wants to change that use, we now are guiding that to be some sort of mixed use development. So really looking at, up from kind of the north part of Maine at Quarry down into our true downtown, and even expanding that mixed use. And this, was part of the Kinney Corridor Plan as well, but to the west side of the river. So we're not just staying along Main, we're, doing a little expansion there, but then also bringing that mixed use opportunity around the university as well. So obviously, as we talked about in this land use category as well, there's flexibility of what that mixed use form looks like. It's not just the commercial on ground floor and retail, apartments on top. It can take some different forms, and we will let the zoning updates to the zoning ordinance really dictate what that starts to look like from performance standards and things of that nature. The one thing we were also mindful of is when we talk about commercial uses as well, that kind of that public and institutional use could also be incorporated in mixed use as well, where needed. So when we were, looking at the library and things like that, that is identified, it's not likely that the library is going to go anywhere in the near term. But from a general standpoint, there are lots of commonalities in terms of how, in terms of like traffic and things that come into play with a commercial use and a public and institutional use. And so we wanted to be, more consistent in some of those, but you could also have a future library space that could have a coffee shop attached to it, or Norwood Young America has a library, its city center, senior center, and apartments above it. So not inhibiting us from those opportunities as well. And then I think the piece where we'll, where the medium makes more, making sure that we're being accurate with what's in there today. The thought of, we took the mixed use, obviously, we have it on Main, and then second, there's already mixed uses happening on either side there. So wanting to make sure that that was included, but really stopping it at the properties that front second, and then transitioning, having a transition of uses into medium beyond that. And, have had some discussion on where that boundary lies, but we'll do a little bit more checking on making sure that we're being accurate of existing densities there as well. Anything I missed from mixed use?
There's a lot more of it on this map.
Yes.
I mean, that we've really expanded that core quite a bit, so that's something you might wanna.
Nobody builds mixed use anymore. Nobody in here in this town builds it. It doesn't work.
You can't afford it.
Well, yeah, and I get the idea that we want it on there so they can, and I like the concept that you're keeping it wide open, so there's a lot of options, but yes.
And that's where you end up with horizontal mixed use. So rather than stacking on top, you're
Right.
doing them next to each other. So you can still have a much more, so you can have housing next to commercial, even if it's not on top of it, because yes, the financing can get tricky.
Yeah.
When you're trying to get it all, those different uses in one building.
Well, and two, I mean, if our regulations haven't allowed it, then nobody's gonna build it, right? You're not gonna go through a pain in the ass zoning process if you don't have to.
Well, but they have allowed it, look at the building next to Dairy Queen, and that was the idea there, was
Right.
commercial down here and residential.
So is there permits in that little couple centers behind?
Mhm. Yeah. And that was, kind of the, let's be able to do that,
Right.
and it's struggled. since the day
It's
of
tough, because it's tough to find that somebody's gonna build a little dentist shop or a little lawyer shop, or, things that you typically find in one of those things. It's, I don't know, it's such a goofy development world out there that it's, I don't know how you get to it. All the different concepts and.
Yeah, and the Paulson Road apartments that we just looked at a week
Yeah.
ago, they
Yeah.
have carved out some commercial
Yep.
space there. It's a commercial space that their tenants can utilize as a
Right.
fitness center.
Right.
Kind of thing, but also for the public, so, they found something that they felt like could fit.
Yeah, I know, and I get it.
Kind of like the hotel with the.
Right.
fitness.
Yep,
Mhm.
yep, and the restaurant in it.
Yes, yeah. One thing about this, that there's some, higher density housing that's not on here. Like the townhomes over across from, the high school and the
DeSanctis Park.
DeSanctis Park. The DeSanctis Park.
Has 84 units.
Right here,
Okay.
there.
And those are both brand new developments, so that may
Yeah.
have not have gotten into the data set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's still referring to County Road Double M instead of Paul Avenue.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they still have Lake Louise on there. That's been gone for 2 years.
Yeah, right.
Does that not have PUD on
So that would actually take the white out and bring it more into green,
Yeah.
like Louise would.
Yep, and the boundaries that we have on here are the existing parcel boundaries as we have them. So yes, the lake may be gone, but the parcel boundaries have not changed. So that's why it's being shown in the way that it is.
And isn't this T and B up here?
That's what the zoning is.
It's
yeah.
zone
Yes.
T, okay, but it is all single family. or-
Yeah.
It is.
Yes.
We tried.
Yeah.
We tried, we're the little engine that comes.
The effort was made, there's credit there,
Yes.
there's credit there.
I shouldn't say we, staff.
Well, the coloring really pulls it out, so if you're, you can find things quickly.
It's not all teal.
Medium or?
golf course?
Is that the golf course and the bike riding?
This says golf course, and then that is.
Well, this would be Kilcarn.
Oh, yeah.
And that corresponds with.
So that one looks a little funny, you guys are moving outside of the which is fine, but just because the green is,
Yeah, I'm focusing on kind of
yeah,
like.
it's okay. But the green underneath makes the color look a little different, but that's showing it's medium density residential.
Okay.
So same as this stuff, just the green underline makes it look a little different. So I think, as again, you're looking at things as well, there are some things that are, again, just representative of what's there today. And that doesn't mean that they have to change. Doesn't mean that they have to, if there's something we do want to see change in, again, the land use plan doesn't mean that it has to change, as soon as this is adopted. It's, allows for that change to occur when it needs to happen, things as well. So if we want to see more consistency in one space or another, things like that.
I'm just wondering, like up in here, because this is Tattersall, right? And that's the apartments. I'm just wondering if this might even work for mixed use down near Tattersall to allow for more, because right now it's a lot of those businesses, it's kind of.
Sure. Just like drawing all over.
Yeah, you're gonna have apartments there, it almost feels like that could also be like a mixed use.
Sure.
Rather than just focusing on.
You're talking about.
Paulson Road.
Yeah, well, this is what we, no, this area, like Tattersall,
this whole
here, the
area.
apartments are here,
Right, okay.
like this is
Yeah.
where the McDonald's and all the parties and stuff like that, that be mixed use. as opposed to commercial. I think that's-
When you go on the other side, strip area down there, with kitchenette and all that, yes.
Yeah.
It's all great. Redevelop it and, yeah.
feel free to write questions or this is your space to give us thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so easy. I'm gonna turn it over my class, right?
And maybe while you're thinking through things as well, chat about, as I mentioned earlier, we're using those same base districts, but applying them outside of city limits. So you'll see, the low density residential, the medium density. The one thing that I would note here is in terms of a little bit of a difference is you see a lot of that low density yellow in the inside city limits, and you see a lot more medium density outside, and that was intentional. Just from that missing middle concept of housing where that's really where we don't have enough of that form of housing, and that's really what a lot of people are looking for. So we tried to be intentional about where we were identifying medium versus low density, but that's obviously up for discussion, things of that nature. The one thing I would note, and I forgot to write down the numbers because I can't keep them off the top of my head. When we looked at the population projections that we have, we made some very base assumptions on, if we developed at an average of 6 units per acre and the average household size was 2.5 people per household, the acreage, and I can look it up too, but we obviously within the 20-year horizon of this plan would not come near needing all of this area. So just as a reminder as well, but then also thinking through, we will overlay the green corridors onto this as well. But so as we're looking at the areas outside of city limits, I wanted to call attention to the area to the east. Now I'm upside down, so I have to make sure my directions are correct. East of Sterling Ponds and kind of the southeast side of town as well, where we were very clear with the floodplain of identifying that in a conservancy or open space land use that, there's just, we want to make sure that that's very clear.
Or a racetrack.
But then the same piece is starting to happen up here with Sterling Ponds, where we have floodplain coming through, where that boundary that's set right now is the floodplain limits, is how we cut up right here. It doesn't mean that there's room for change. And then the steep slopes, if you were to compare, are shown here in that conservancy. So I wanted to call that out because there's a couple different ways that those green corridors can start to be used from a policy standpoint. There's using it in this manner. So if I'm a developer looking to come in, I know that I can't just off base, this area is untouchable essentially. But then there's the other, when we look at some of these other, we have a lot of steep slopes throughout here, but we're not at this point showing them as conservancy. What happens then from a development review perspective is, how do we need to make sure that subdivision, lot sizes are maybe bigger or small, when the development comes in, we have a little bit more flexibility of how they get managed in some of those things. So there's a couple different policy ways that you could look at things, but wanting to call out that differentiation there. The last piece that I will do from kind of an overview perspective, and then let you guys noodle a little bit more, is the area here to the south west is a different category than what we've talked about, and is a urban reserve area. And so we wanted to maintain, this is area I don't think changed a ton in terms of the, we've left everything in here that's in the existing comprehensive plan urban area, but weren't really, because of the natural resources and then the struggle to have transportation connectivity, it's not the most ideal area for growth. Doesn't mean that we couldn't see growth occur in that area, but it's not an area where we're like, let's, really promote growth in that area. So what this reserve area is intended to do is say, we know that this is an opportunity area for us. We're not active, we don't have an active plan of what we want that to be, but that doesn't mean that somebody couldn't come in and say, I'm interested in this area. It just with where we're at as a city, when that would happen, it would allow staff and you as the plan commission to say, yeah, this product makes sense to us and it's, aligning with our natural resource preservation goals and some of those things. So it's keeping it as a focus area, but not to the same, direct level of growth opportunity as the other areas, just with how hard it is to provide transportation connectivity and then the management of those natural resources. I think, am I missing anything on that we talked about from urban area?
No, and again, with what Steph said before about how much over the next 10 to 20 years we might actually grow into, it wouldn't be to the max in all directions, but we want to make sure that if the market is starting to take development in one area or another, we're being mindful about that.
Where do we see most of our growth going? I see a lot north and south. Is that what we would?
So I think it's almost easier to look at the topography
Yeah,
and see where it's actually easiest.
and that's where it would go.
And so it's closest to existing transportation and, where it's easy to extend utilities and where you're not running
So Highway
up and over
35.
something.
Yeah.
And so and again, like that's where most of the population has to be is going, is on that corridor. But again, one
Yeah, I
is
just
pretty
wonder, but I just wonder,
intentional
like,
because we
even if
can
some of this is
a
the
little bit more
the university part,
concentrated and
Yeah.
not
doesn't
start
make
to
sense for that
extend, so we
single
have
family.
long
We need
arm,
yeah.
direction.
Anybody can buy a university farm anytime. It's happened several times, so don't because it is now.
Right, no, I realize that.
A lot of this stuff used to be university here too. Picture used to be on university.
And
We don't want to solely just
so again.
Yeah, we might be. Stormwater ponds.
Yeah. That's still crazy or creating.
This is all just flat part of the.
The land trust.
And I think you could just do this when we can make that top layer, because it almost a little bit through, or like vice versa, if you do the topography is like a little bit.
I think we're,
Yeah, it's.
I'm sure it's, I'm sure it's a
on
lot.
that because,
Everyone
yeah,
good?
because when we're doing this, like, this.
Oh, so.
Right.
No, it's always everybody when you have these little strips of commercial, you end up with like strip centers, so.
Why not?
Not, I mean, these things like.
A strip center would be the reference of what I.
Well,
That was about hard.
Like the Little Caesars strip center,
Well-
30 years from now when it's shaggy and.
It's interesting, it will be interesting how, the trend might.
Gentrify the area.
Well, maybe, I mean, because you get a lot
Yeah,
of
it's-
traffic.
Yeah.
Through there, so.
I just always worry when I see narrow,
For sure.
narrow zoning, or not zoning, but.
Yeah, and it's a tough area because, you're backed with the floodplain.
Yeah.
You're not gonna put low density residential
Right.
right there, so what do you do? So, if you haven't, floor's open, but.
You know, just make it all great. Anybody knows me.
Well, this is where the dentist is, right?
I think,
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
So this area.
That was the.
Like destination.
Right, I mean, that's
Drive.
the important.
Right, I know there's no roads around.
No, we have, it would have to, there's
paths.
I just wonder if there's enough space to build up, you know.
This is that guy, he's got 160 acres there, he built a $2 million house.
Yeah, the problem.
Like an area that.
And of course,
Build that someday. That's why I like to tell people, remember, like you said, you guys, it's out.
Yeah.
But I just wonder about that.
For sure.
Well, the access to the back, right, because that's.
That's a long road to build to get to.
Right, and so that's like, that's the hard part. And that's a little bit of here, you could show stuff here, but to get to.
Somebody hasn't done my hand over 30 years.
Yes.
It's like when Chris was saying, the Kitty River Land Trust, owns a lot of that. They own all of Johnson's Farm.
They do not own the building, they have a conservation easement on it, so thus, you know, it's moving.
That's a medium,
That's, yeah, that's where.
Yeah.
So, or.
Well, yeah, this is mixed use.
Right, oh, yeah.
So again, like looking
My eyes going, get too old for this.
that way, you know,
The original, so that's.
That's medium. That's more industrial, yeah.
Yep, in the city, but you have to bridge. To get utility.
Well, I have.
Need to change the process.
Preserving a parcel here.
And I know it's small text, but
So I found.
it's, you have to, you know, they're here in the. To help provide, and we didn't. Yes.
Still wasn't. And I have video of them putting, putting the things in.
Oh.
I'm trying to get all of the guys and maybe I'll get them up on Facebook.
Oh, yeah. Stuff like that. Right, okay, so I take back some of my negative feelings towards
Sit
it.
station and the document, and then park it, and it's
Yeah.
a little figure.
Yeah.
Baby trucks.
It's crazy what.
For the two of you, are there any areas that stuck up to you that are beneficial to call out with these guys to get thoughts?
Just go ahead and go there and start.
West boundary and how much we should be tracking up there.
Where are we?
It is that I continue to wonder about the northwest boundary.
Well, what you have in here is that you don't capture is how much tribune is built up. I mean, you don't have that really captured in here, like it is a high, there's a high amount of homes here already.
A lot.
Yeah. Pretty north of it.
And they're just about,
Multers are really adding up. Whatever that garage thing is out there.
Going towards Hudson.
Yeah, they were some $1,000 for a unit, for a small unit.
it's a $250,000.
God.
Fancy.
Just to park your car and work on it?
Oh, I'm.
Have you been up to the
That's
airport?
what it is.
Yeah.
That thing you built on the.
Yeah, your RV, your.
Have you not seen common garages?
There's one by my house that's.
They're uber expensive and they're uber profitable.
So it's like a little apartment with a big garage.
And you could like
No,
put
there's
it,
no apartment.
well, you can make it a whole, like, you can have your TV set, your whole,
So it'd be it's like a main cave,
Yeah.
but you can park your RV there and.
and you can work on your cars in the wintertime.
So right now, I'm getting.
See, I'm not from here. I don't know. what
There's
northern
lots
people do.
of,
I don't have winter where I'm from.
it's more of a, hey, I want to leave my house and I don't have, so I can get away from my family.
I could go work on my car
Yeah.
or.
It's ad for people from golf course communities that kind of park their RV in their community. So
Right.
they need a place to
And
park it.
boats.
And they have
Vehicles
enough
out.
cash flow to go buy a building as opposed to renting it. So it's all over there, so you have choice.
In
And
front of us, actually.
then you have people that were part of that, found land to the other side of it with horse owners. So the horse people realize that parking your horse here, now they're parking their car where they park their horse.
Whatever works.
This is your target market, has a horse near a condo.
Yes, yeah.
On the northwest part of the cities. And when you start looking at how much horse boarding is, you really like, I have horses at my place than people.
But that was one issue.
Unless
I
you
haven't
get,
even thought about it as horse parking.
It was-
Start using that.
Yeah.
Park your horse in my house.
actually, it's a horse B&B.
There you go, yes, yeah.
Bed and board.
Uh-huh.
Great. See,
Yes.
So, and the intention for the corporate park isn't, it's not industrial park, right? I mean, it's kind of more of like
because that was too close to the
corporate park. So
Yeah,
it
that was
happens
too
to
close to
sort of-
our.
Whatever someone wants to do.
Which
Yeah.
to me is like.
So, and that's, you know, the coloring gets a
In
little,
part,
you know,
I get it.
where, how you're thinking about things,
Part of
but
part of it
the
was
purple is our true
in our.
industrial. Right, and,
Well, this is, I was just wondering, I mean, if the corporate park's gonna be a more industrial park, do we wanna put a like?
That's it.
Put a high density residential right in the middle of an industrial park, but if it's
Yeah,
more of a corporate park.
Yeah, you do, because the orders don't go up.
like, you know,
So the other thing that we're not doing on this
Okay.
and so the height
Would be basically within the, like,
so it would be, well, it would be next to it.
right, yeah, that's,
And Butter's brown.
okay, that makes sense.
Oh,
That-
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the idea is jobs
You know, I think-
Connectivity
also,
to-
so if there's a manufacturer that does clean technology, jobs.
And the idea would be like the little retail access right there.
I think it would be great out there.
Retail stuff close by.
And node.
Yeah.
That is your,
Yeah, actually, then you're right.
your
Yeah,
current western gateway to the city.
But it's cool, but
And another picture.
And that's what you said.
So Ben doesn't have to
busy
drive
figuring
somewhere
out
to
stupid
gas.
ways to spend their money.
I know, that's why I'm just one all the time.
I mean, I would hope everybody goes to Prescott.
I know.
Reasons a gallon cheaper down there.
Well, it's on the way to Hastings on the holiday
Yeah,
in Minnesota.
yeah,
That is
that's
ridiculous.
the way. it is.
And also, everybody here is getting gas here, in here, as opposed to going to Hudson. That's the key. So then where do you, where do you
But
put
Hudson
it?
gas is expensive as our gas. I don't understand why Prescott gas and Hastings gas.
So then another thing is like, so you have your van trucks, where are you getting diesel for your van trucks?
Yeah, it's really quick to diesel trucks.
All the way down Powell Avenue every day. Where are you?
Yeah.
So if you're in business there, and you have a vehicle that needs diesel, where are you getting your diesel?
Was that the highest, best use for that?
No.
Why? So you're driving down Powell Avenue, which is a 10-ton bridge, you can't drive across Powell Avenue bridge right now.
Uh-huh. Oh.
But you're right.
But do we want big diesel trucks driving through town to get gas?
No, no. Yeah. I know,
The quick trip that we're gonna build on the fourth quick trip.
Where's your electric vehicle charging station?
Trucks will pretty much.
Hopefully someone.
Because that's what all your big trucks are now, are electrics.
You gotta love that
Probably more than probably.
California banning gas vehicles the day before they say, "Oh, don't charge your electric cars, we don't have enough power."
Well, are they putting in chargers at the quick trip?
They have one, but they are not,
They're not the fast ones.
that's 110 outlet.
Running an extension cord, did you put it out here?
What's that say?
I just would double check the density to make sure that we're.
Well, and so one of the things in our current comp plan is we go by gross density, and I've run into issues with that because it doesn't reflect this stuff, and so I think in our new comp plan, we should be talking about that. So we need to adjust the numbers a little bit, so doing that check on
Yes.
what our existing density of net density
Yeah.
would be helpful.
What's this here?
Because if there are
This is,
unbuildable
okay, so
areas,
this is Cascade.
you know, and you're actually, your net density is more of what.
Yep, the room.
Right, to have to the gross area,
Right.
This would be,
because it's artificially.
this would be all the, this would be all the.
It's like a runway to me. Their zoning requires 15,000 square foot lots, which none of their residents at all is 15,000 square foot lots. So if somebody's house burns down, they can't rebuild their house without a variance. I mean, it's just the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
I can't rebuild my house.
I
can't rebuild my house.
In the
Do
future.
they not have
Oh, really?
non-conforming?
I gotta get
And that's found or somewhere else?
They do, but I think somewhere. I
I
think, well, it's just,
The future plans.
I think
I'll
how,
show you how it
I have to remember now.
That was 30.
Yeah, 50% of value or whatever.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, I think they just didn't make it. Crazy thing, they don't want sex with here. They just realized, like,
Unless they want redevelopment.
It's just kind of right away, you know, it was one person sells a house, he said, only one was, 4 or 5. It's just kind of a weird thing. Uses for it. Uses for Wisconsin. Yeah. We got the bus. I said that land's too expensive to put a bus.
Yeah. And they wanted,
Well, I think if you guys don't mind, we'll go back and have a conversation and address things. So we will get a PDF sent over of this as well. There's a couple things that I want to make a couple tweaks before we send it over to you. A couple things that we just need to update. But we'll get you a PDF to look at. We intentionally made them large PDFs so they're easier to do and out of on your computers at home. So, but Chris, there you go. You have that whole stack.
Students will be so excited.
And just with time here too, I wanted to, I know we sent this ahead of time. We don't need to dive deep into the, up here, so it's kind of on the next piece. But I guess to that extent, be thinking about, what we laid out when we get that updated PDF, take another look, let us know your thoughts. Comments and questions there as we move through things as well. The next part on our agenda is, land use is, again, that core component of why we do a comprehensive plan, but it's so connected to the other systems and fabric of the community, which is great why we talk about all these other elements. So we went through a process of looking at and kind of thinking about the format of the plan. And this is maybe the piece that I want to hit on more than what the content is in here. We're trying to be very thoughtful of creating a plan, as you mentioned, that is understandable by the public, that we don't have a 1,000-page document full of data and research that may not even be used by staff. So we're thinking very thoughtfully about having these technical appendices. We'll use that whole appendices for an example, where that's something that's accessible so you can understand where we came from, but the plan itself only has those technical statements within it. If somebody who's really interested, you go find that more information, but the general public just wants to look at what those technicals are, right? So taking that same thought process into the each chapters or each plan element of the comprehensive plan. And so there, will be technical memorandums or additional research that will be summarized and maybe even set up in a space where it can be updated on a regular basis. A lot of what we do to understand current conditions, the community profile that we reviewed earlier this year is already out of date, if you had access to updated, real-time information on demographics. But it's what we needed to run the analysis of the plan. So we want to make sure that you all have access to that information, and it's where it makes sense is maybe in a space where it can be updated on a cyclical cycle. So from a housing supply standpoint, thinking about, okay, what is our makeup of, different single family and multifamily housing, and, what are those different styles? Setting that up in a framework that in 3 years, that analysis can be rerun and we have access to updated information rather than still having some 2005 information that really doesn't give us any justice anymore. But then also really been focusing the content of each chapter on the issues and opportunities that have been identified through this process. So again, that is, what are the existing experiences, barriers, challenges that we are dealing with as a community. So I'll use housing because it's up here. We talked a lot about that, the housing demand and having access to housing, the affordability of housing, the connection to our workforce and having, for those that want the ability to live and work in the same place, that connection, conversations on senior housing, homelessness, and seeing, what are those different issues or opportunities that have been identified and really highlighting that so we have an understanding of what it is we were looking at, what the goals, the extra information to support our goals, and really what then connects us to implementation. So having that in each chapter, and then also our tools and resources. So as we're looking at those different issues and opportunities, what are the tools that we can put in here to be guidance for all of you as you're making decisions, or for staff as they're trying to administer the comprehensive plan. So from a housing perspective, what are the tools for us to create affordable housing within the community? What are some, financing tools that the city has access to? What are financing tools at the, state or regional level, or even federal level that we could deploy here in the community to build more affordable housing? And then on the flip side, what are also some preservation tools? A great way to create affordable housing is to maintain the housing that already exists in a way that's, affordable, but also livable for everyone. So what are some, what are those specific tools in play? The intent here is that we're not dictating, we may dictate that this is the tool that makes the most sense for you, but generally we're saying here are the available tools for you. So you have access to those resources when you need to make that decision. Another example is tools for neighborhood preservation. That connects us to who we are as a community, these core neighborhoods that we've already established, that social fabric that comes with our housing system. What are some tools for, preserving our existing neighborhoods and thinking about the establishment of new neighborhoods and things as well. So that's really the core of what we were trying to outline here within this document, is those two components. And then of course there will be implementation that is associated, implementation actions associated with each of the elements. We've gotten to that point in the process. That's our next conversation here as well. But what are then the actions that we should be taking? So I won't go deep into what we've kind of outlined here. Maybe just more, this is what the framework that we were thinking of. So maybe the ask would be, A, do you have any questions on what I just outlined? And then B, giving you the opportunity with that context to take another look at what we started to outline here. And are there any topical areas or policy directions that you think we are missing across the plan elements? We didn't include land use here intentionally because we're having this land use discussion, but all of our other plan elements are included in here. So did I miss anything on? Okay. Any questions on kind of like the plan format and outlook, what we're intending to do, or what the ask is for this with this document?
This format, clearly connecting tools and resources to issue updated or releases.
Okay. Perfect. And this was provided to you in an email from earlier as well. So we're taking notes across there. The last piece for us that I just wanted to touch on is just where we're at from a scheduling standpoint and kind of overall process. Oh, I didn't highlight this, but this is helpful. And this was not provided to you. You do have a copy of the Building River Falls survey and pop-up summary in front of you as well. So you maybe took the survey on, hopefully you all took the survey, or at least knew it was on or attended the pop-up event. This is the summary that really is. We got some good input from folks on what type of development they'd like to see, so just wanted to make sure you had access to that as well. So sorry for asking that. But just an overall Focus River Falls update and kind of next steps. Outdoor recreation plan is in an exciting space from an engagement standpoint right now. I didn't ask Dan or Kendra or Sanford on this, but we're over 175 the first week. Okay. At 175, over 175 people that have taken the outdoor recreation survey on Engage RF so far. We had a really great pop-up event at our McKinney this past weekend, talked to over 80 people in that period, and then we will have staff at the flag football games this weekend from 10 to 12. I can't remember the exact times, but to kind of get a different targeted group there. I think Cindy was probably suggesting that we sit by the porta potties, but you gotta do what you gotta do. That's where all the people are going to go when they're watching their games. So, so that's an exciting piece from where we're at with the outdoor recreation plan. We have our meeting next week with that steering committee, the bike and pedestrian plan. They've done a lot of information for staff review yesterday. So a lot of things going through initial review from that standpoint. That steering committee will meet on October 5th, I think. To kind of the final, where we're headed in that plan direction. But those, we're really moving to kind of the plan drafting and final recommendation phases for those two plans. And the intent with our overall schedule is that those will come before each steering committee for review yet this year in the November-ish timeframe, and will come to you as the plan commission for your review in December. And then we will wait to include the overall adoption of all of those plans until we're adopted in full comprehensive plan through council in March of next year. What that means from a schedule perspective for the comp plan is that we're using the rest of this year to finish development. So allowing you guys to take some time off from comp in December, where we're finishing drafting the plan, would come up for review for all of you in January. We move to public review in January, February, and then it would come through for recommendation from plan commission and then to common council in March for final adoption. So very high level overview. There's a few more components that weave into there, but just kind of giving you an overview on the development overall. Did I miss anything? Perfect. One other piece that I should mention that's also exciting is we sent letters and a survey to I don't even know the total number from a large tract property owner. But everyone that was invited to our large tract property owner stakeholder meeting, 120, yeah, to just provide an additional, opportunity for input, asking some general questions about how they currently use the property, what their plans are for the future, to just give us a better understanding of what's going on. So we're starting to get some input back in. That way it's totally voluntary. There's nothing requiring people to respond. But just wanted, we heard that group through the stakeholder meeting that they wanted more opportunities to engage. So giving that opportunity to provide for additional feedback in there as well. So we'll make sure when we conclude that summary process that you're all aware of the results that come up from that as well. So I think we covered a lot, and I appreciate you all hanging out for 2 hours. I know it can get to be a long meeting, but
well, at least it wasn't after our plan commission meeting.
Yeah,
talking about that. So this was your motion to adjourn. Is that what you're looking at?
So I do have just a quick announcement. So there's a new community planning club on campus. community planning. And we are hosting the first ever National Parking Day event this Friday on campus. So if y'all haven't heard of National Parking Day, it's the idea of highlighting how parking affects our neighborhoods and communities. And the idea is you take a parking space and turn it into a micro park to show how much more useful land that we use to store cars could be if we turn it into something more productive like parks. And it took, honest to God, pulling teeth to get our parking services programs and police departments to actually agree to allow us to. It was ridiculous what we went through. But it's going to be Friday from 10 to 2 on the little parking lots right in front of South Hall. So if anybody wants to come by, we're going to have plants set up, we're going to have like seating, we're going to have popcorn and parking trivia. So it's going to be a super fun time. And if y'all can stop by, that'll be awesome. But if I know, if we'd gotten approval sooner, I would have maybe tried to figure out like how we have like a thing from the comp plan there, but with 2 days notice, it's kind of a lot to ask. So anyway, it's gonna be a super fun time. And if y'all want to come by and say hi and check it out. And I think Mark Clavich was saying he's working on the Earth Fest, trying to do something National Parking Day like the Earth Fest, or whatever that event is that we have going on. So, and next year maybe we'll do something.
Any update on utility mailer, any, we're looking at utility mailer coming through in October. Flyers by folks and program process. We just as staff, we're having discussions about reaching out to community groups that we had presented to probably back in February and March. Back to them again, October, November-ish, just to get updates. Thank you for the late evening. Thank you.
Stephanie, you're around St. Paul. You have to drive all the way back to St. Paul.
Right out in the
I like extra early. I got here at 1 years.
trying to get permission to do this. I mean, I proposed, I went to Santa Rosa.